program is presented by the Associated General Contractors of America.
Construction equipment moves the earth, moves materials, and provides the power for the building industry. You might be able to build a road with some of this equipment, but usually you can't drive that same equipment on the road it helped build. It's too heavy, too wide, too slow, or maybe it just doesn't go.
When machines like these need to be moved from one location to another, they need to be hauled, and that means trailering. But construction equipment can present a lot of special problems. These loads can be longer, higher, wider, and heavier than normal. In this program, we're going to show you safe techniques for trailering, including loading, hauling, and unloading your construction equipment.
Safety doesn't start and stop on the job site. A piece of equipment presents one kind of hazard when it's working at a job site or in the yard, and another hazard entirely when it's on top of a trailer going down the highway. The potential danger to the driver and everyone else on that highway makes safety even more essential when you're making the move.
Trailering doesn't start with loading the equipment. It starts here, before your rig ever leaves the yard. First, you should have training on the vehicle and trailer being used, and depending on the size of your rig, you'll probably need a commercial driver's license. Next, make sure your vehicle and trailer are rated for the load you're hauling.
The trailer needs to be compatible with the truck and the load. It should have a compatible hitch, whether it's a fifth wheel or the same size ball and socket.
A thorough vehicle inspection is essential before you take on a load. This means filling out your driver's inspection report, or if that isn't required, make sure you check the same systems. Check the truck for
proper fluid levels, making sure there are no spills or leaks. Check the steering, brakes and clutch, the suspension, wheels and tires, the fifth wheel or coupling, and all lights, mirrors, and reflectors. Check the trailer's coupling, brakes, suspension, wheels and tires. Check the landing gear, frame, and bed for deformation or damage. Make sure tie-down points are intact, and the electrical harness is compatible, and all lights and reflectors are operative.
It's important that you anticipate the requirements of your load before you take it on.
Does the trailer have the right kind and number of tie-down points for the equipment you're loading? Is the load going to be oversized? You will probably need flags, signs, permits, or even another vehicle to move it safely. Will it be too tall for any bridges, underpasses, or utility lines? Too wide for a narrow roadway? You'll have to plan an alternate route or restructure the load. Is it going to be overweight? A load that's legal on the highway could be overweight on a local street. That could mean planning an alternate route. Using more axles to distribute the weight, like adding a dolly, or obtaining a special overweight permit from the Department of Transportation.
It may not be your job to apply for a permit, but make sure it's been done before you start out, because it's required to be in the vehicle at all times. Keep in mind that the DOT won't issue an overweight or oversized permit if it's possible to reduce the weight or dimension by dividing the load. This doesn't mean dismantling a piece of equipment that is normally field ready, like taking the bucket off a front-end loader.
But if the equipment normally comes in sections, like extra mass sections for a crane, those could be divided into more than one load so that none of the loads would be overweight or oversized.
This also applies to multiple units. Just because you can figure out a way to get 4 different pieces of equipment on one trailer doesn't mean you'll be allowed to haul all 4 if that makes you overweight or oversized. And keep in mind that weight limits can also be seasonal, such as in northern states that prohibit heavy traffic during the spring thaw.
So, right up front, you should know that your equipment is in good shape, know if your load has any special requirements, and know your route. The rule is, know before you go. When you're ready to load the equipment, position the trailer on a solid, level roadway if at all possible. Soft or uneven ground could cause the vehicle to shift unexpectedly during loading. If the trailer loads from the rear, keep it attached to the vehicle for stability. Certain trailers, such as front-loading models, require that the vehicle be detached for loading. If the trailer is equipped with an adjustable air suspension, lowering it as far as possible will make loading easier and increase its stability. Don't use makeshift ramps. The ramp should be designed for the trailer and the type of equipment being loaded, particularly the size and width of the tires or tracks.
Driving equipment on and off a ramp is a critical operation and requires a skilled, trained operator. Don't get pressured by the situation into attempting to operate equipment that you aren't familiar with. If you're not qualified on the equipment, insist on someone who is.
One of the problems in driving up a ramp is that it can cause a dramatic shift in the equipment's center of gravity. This can cause the equipment to become unstable and possibly flip. In this situation, the equipment will generally be more stable in one direction than another, so it makes a big difference whether you drive on forwards or backwards. If you don't know what direction to load a piece of equipment, don't guess. Look in the operating instructions or check with the manufacturer or dealer. You can also minimize this shift by keeping any movable parts, like a bucket or forks, as low as possible. As you drive onto the edge of the trailer, there is also a shift in the balance of the machine. This is especially pronounced in vehicles with tracks. Proceed very slowly through this point until the vehicle rights itself. It's always helpful to have a second person guide the equipment operator. That person should give clear hand signals and be in a position where they can always be seen. In many cases, it's also helpful if the operator can find a way to sight the equipment by aligning it on part of the trailer or truck. Make sure the equipment is positioned on the trailer so that the weight is best distributed for hauling. You need to check with your State Department of Transportation for regulations regarding load splits.
And never attempt side loading if your equipment is not designed for it. Improper side loading can damage the trailer, the equipment, and cause you injury.
Immediately after loading, clear any loose dirt or debris off the equipment and trailer. A dirt clod breaking loose at highway speeds can mean big trouble, so it pays to be as thorough as you can.
Once the equipment is in position, you can start tying it down. When it comes to trailering safety, proper load securement is probably the single most important thing you can do.
Check the tie downs to make sure they aren't deformed, damaged, or excessively worn. If you don't know where they are, check the equipment manual. Frayed strands or kinks in wire rope, wear spots or deformities in chain links indicate an out-of-service condition. The same goes for tie-down points on the trailer. Cracked welds, bent rails, or nicked and bent floor rings should all be reported and repaired. Compatibility is important. For the size of the equipment, tie-down points have to align with the tie-down points on the side of the trailer. Improvised attachments can deform the connectors, cause wear, or even failure. For the front and back, the tie-down should be arranged so that they work against each other, preferably in a diagonal or X-shaped pattern. And don't use a cheater bar or extension to tighten them. The manufacturer's devices are designed to keep the tension within safe limits.
A loose and shifting load is an invitation to catastrophe. In fact, the Highway Patrol has indicated that inadequate load securement is a chief reason for stopping a loaded vehicle. So before you make the move, tie it tight and tie it right.
If you're moving a large machine, you should measure its height and width after it's loaded. You need to know your clearances so you can keep an eye out for low bridges or other obstructions, particularly if you're unfamiliar with the route.
Also be aware of clearance under the trailer. This is especially important when going over railroad tracks or steep grades. A trailer with air-regulated controls can help you clear railroad tracks that might otherwise hang you up.
And this may seem obvious, but check your mirrors again before you start out, because the equipment may have changed your line of vision. You may even need extension mirrors if the load is extra wide.
Once you're on the road, the load may shift slightly. It's always a good idea to stop after you've driven the first few miles and get out to check the tie-downs and retighten any that have worked loose. The load should be much more secure for the rest of the trip. Driving with a load of construction equipment can require special precautions.
Since these loads are often higher and more top-heavy than normal, you'll want to take it easy on the corners. Allow more room for the turn and take it a bit slower. Allow plenty of distance for stopping and be extra cautious if the road and weather conditions start to deteriorate. When you get to your destination, unloading is pretty much the reverse of your loading procedures. Pick a firm, level roadway. Unless it's front loading, keep the trailer attached to the vehicle and have someone help guide the equipment down off the ramp. If you had any difficulties with a vehicle or trailer, or if you see any damage that you didn't notice before, be sure to report it so that it can get fixed before that rig is used again.
Trailering construction equipment safely requires training and some planning. You need to know where you're going and what restrictions there might be on your route.
You need to have the right rig for the load, know the equipment, how to get it on and off the trailer, and how to tie it down.
But all that planning pays off when you're making the move.